If Ranger hadn't clawed at the wall, they never would have opened it. And if they never opened it, Angela Simmons would have stayed buried behind cheap drywall, her story forgotten, just another name on the back of a milk carton from 1998. But this dog, this old retired canine German Shepherd, wouldn't stop scratching. Not at the floor, not at the door, at the wall, the bathroom wall. And what they found inside? It didn't just change one family's life. It reopened an entire town's deepest wound. Crestwood, Ohio, wasn't the kind of place where news happened. Not really. It was a town of faded porch swings, soft-serve ice cream stands, and Sunday morning yard sales. Most of the folks who lived here had been born within a 5-mile radius and hoped to die there too, which made what happened on 11th Street all the more jarring. Jake and Melissa Carter weren't Crestwood natives. They were out-of-towners, as Old Man Doyle at the hardware store called them, mid-30s, childless, and optimistic enough to think they could turn a dilapidated foreclosure into a dream home. It had been sitting empty for years, a 3-bedroom ranch with outdated linoleum, wood paneling, and a bathroom that smelled off. That's where it started. Maybe it's the pipes, Jake muttered, holding his nose as he knelt by the toilet. Melissa frowned. Or mold? God, I hope it's not black mold. This whole reno will go up in smoke. But it wasn't the pipes. It wasn't mold. It was Ranger. Officer Dana Ross was supposed to be off duty that Wednesday morning. But when the Carters called in a complaint about a strange animal smell and mentioned their golden retriever had started barking at the bathroom wall non-stop, Dana raised one eyebrow and asked a quiet favor: permission to bring Ranger. Retired 2 years earlier after 7 years of military and police service, Ranger still had that fire behind his cloudy amber eyes. His hips were bad now. Arthritis had set in. But his instincts? Razor sharp. And when Dana walked him into that cramped, yellow-lit bathroom, he stiffened like he'd hit a tripwire. Then the scratching began. Not random scratching. Deliberate, focused. Right above the baseboard, behind the tub. Jake stared. What is he doing? Dana crouched beside her partner, placing a steadying hand on his back. He's alerting. Melissa looked confused. To what? Dana didn't answer. She just kept watching him, her brows furrowed. She'd seen this behavior before. In Afghanistan, when Ranger alerted to a buried IED under 12 inches of clay. And again in Cincinnati, when he led her to a stash of fentanyl sealed inside a cinder block wall. But this didn't feel like narcotics. It felt old, cold. That night, Dana couldn't sleep. She pulled up Crestwood's missing persons archive, starting with female disappearances. Most were found. Runaways, custody disputes, false alarms. But one face stuck out. Angela Simmons, age 22. Last seen, February 1998. Listed as missing from this exact neighborhood. Dana leaned closer. The photo was grainy, but Angela had dark, intelligent eyes and a hesitant smile. The file said she'd worked part-time as a babysitter and cashier at the town's old Kmart. Lived with her boyfriend. Vanished after a fight. No signs of foul play. The case had gone cold by 2000. Dana's gut twisted. Next morning, she knocked on the Carters' door at 7:15 a.m. with a plainclothes detective and a request to return with Ranger for one more sweep. The second time was worse. Ranger didn't just scratch this time, he whined. A low, aching sound that made Jake's skin crawl. Donna knelt beside him again, placed her palm flat against the wall and closed her eyes. The drywall was cold. Too cold for a wall that backed up to the water heater closet. We need to open it, she whispered. Jake hesitated. Is that legal? Only with a warrant, said the detective. Or unless the homeowners give us permission. Melissa's voice cut through the silence. Do it. They peeled back the wallpaper first. Peaches and faded vines from the 90s. Underneath, water damage, mold. Then, something caught Dana's eye. Etched into the drywall, just visible in the exposed patch, 3 letters. A.S. Angela Simmons? No one said a word. The sound of the box cutter slicing into the wall filled the room. Piece by piece, they removed the panels. That's when the smell hit. Jake gagged. Melissa covered her mouth. Ranger stood completely still, tail low, gaze fixed forward like a soldier on patrol. Behind the insulation was a layer of tarp. Industrial, thick, yellowed. Dana's hand shook as she peeled it back. But before we go further, if you believe animals like Ranger are more than pets, if you believe they're heroes who can uncover what humans miss, make sure to subscribe to Heroes for Animals. These stories deserve to be heard. Inside the tarp, they found bone, not fresh, not gory, but unmistakable. A human rib cage, a lock of dark brown hair, a rotted denim jacket, and clutched in the skeleton's hand, a tiny gold pendant. Dana picked it up. It read, "Love, Mom." The forensic team was called in. The entire house was sealed off. Melissa stood outside in the winter cold, wrapped in a hoodie. "You think it's her?" she asked quietly. Dana didn't answer. She couldn't. But Ranger had already answered the only way he knew how. That night, the town buzzed. Angela Simmons, the girl everyone forgot, might have been inside that house for over 2 decades, right under everyone's nose. Neighbors recalled seeing her with a man in '97. Some swore they heard screams once, but the cops never found evidence. The house changed hands in 2002 after the original owner, Russell Dean, vanished without warning. Moved south, they said. But he never changed his name, never sold the house, just disappeared. And now a dog was telling everyone to look closer. Dana sat in her car outside the house. Ranger curled beside her, head resting on her thigh. "Good boy," she whispered, but her voice cracked, because deep down, she knew this wasn't over. Walls don't just hold secrets. Sometimes they scream them. And sometimes the only one who hears is a dog. Crestwood didn't sleep the night the bones were found. News vans lined 11th Street before the sun came up. Reporters leaned over crime scene tape, eager for a glimpse inside the quiet beige ranch house that, just days ago, had smelled faintly of mildew and rotting caulk. Now it reeked of something far older and far darker. Angela Simmons' name hadn't made headlines since President Clinton was in office. But this? A 25-year-old cold case cracked wide open by a dog scratching at drywall? It was the kind of story that small towns never forget, and the kind national media couldn't resist. But for Officer Dana Ross, the noise outside wasn't nearly as loud as the one echoing in her mind. She couldn't shake the image of Ranger's body going rigid in that bathroom. The low whine, the almost human way he laid down when the wall came open, like he'd found something sacred, something painful. This wasn't just an alert, it was grief. The forensic team worked through the night, carefully removing the bones, hair, and tattered clothing found behind the insulation. They treated the scene like an archaeological site, brushing, dusting, cataloging everything. By mid-morning, the remains had been transported to the state lab. Dental records were requested. So was DNA. But Dana already knew. It was Angela. It had to be. She returned to the house later that afternoon, after the media frenzy died down. Jake and Melissa had left to stay with family, their dream renovation now a full-blown crime scene. The house was silent except for the creaking of old vents and Ranger's slow, limping steps across the hardwood floor. Dana didn't need to bring him, but he insisted. He padded straight back to the bathroom, sniffed the wall where the remains had been removed, then turned toward the hallway. One paw hesitated on a loose floorboard. He stopped. Then he scratched. "Again?" Dana whispered. She dropped to her knees, pressing her ear to the floor. Nothing at first. Then, very faint, a hollow sound beneath the boards, not like the rest of the house. She marked the spot and filed for a second warrant. The next morning, a search team arrived with crowbars and infrared scanners. They pulled up 3 boards and found it. A narrow crawl space beneath the hallway, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Inside, wedged behind a support beam, was an old wooden box. Dust-covered, rusted hinges. Dana opened it with gloved hands. Inside, a stack of faded photos, an old makeup compact, and a weathered journal. The initials on the leather cover were barely legible, but Dana didn't need them to be. Angela had kept a diary. The first few pages were bright, hopeful. Angela wrote about her new job at Kmart, about saving for college, and a guy named Russ who'd asked her out after church. "I think he's sweet," she wrote in one entry. "Kind of quiet, but there's something gentle about him. Maybe this one will be different." The tone changed by page 30. "He's possessive, controlling, but he's good to me, mostly." And then, "He doesn't like me going out. I think he followed me to work." Later, "I want to leave, but he says he'll hurt himself. or me. Then came the last entry, February 14th, 1998. If I disappear, I didn't run. I never would have run. I wanted a life. I wanted out, but I never left this house. Dana closed the journal with a trembling hand. The town sheriff, Jerry Walton, stood in stunned silence when Dana dropped the journal on his desk. I thought she ran off, he murmured. That was the theory. Everyone said she left with some trucker. You think she buried herself in the bathroom wall? Dana said, her voice sharper than she intended. Jerry shook his head, rubbing his jaw. No, I don't. They pulled up property records next. In 1998, the house belonged to Russell Dean, a handyman born and raised in Crestwood. No criminal record. Divorced in 2001. Sold the house in 2002 and moved to Mississippi. At least that's what people believed. But the trail ended there. No forwarding address. No bank account after 2003. No death certificate. It was like he'd disappeared into thin air. Dana leaned on her car that night, parked across from the house, staring at the sagging porch and shuttered windows. Ranger sat beside her, watching the front door with that same unwavering focus. You found her, she said, gently scratching behind his ear. But you're not done, are you? He didn't blink, just kept staring. The next morning, Dana visited the Crestwood Library to dig through microfilm archives. She found a wedding announcement from 1995, Russell Dean and Elizabeth Gentry. A photo showed them smiling in front of a white church, her bouquet wilting slightly in the July heat. Elizabeth. That name hadn't come up yet. She tracked it through old utilities and tax filings. Elizabeth Dean was still alive, living just 2 towns over in a retirement complex. Dana paid her a visit that same afternoon. Elizabeth answered the door in a bathrobe, her hair tied back, eyes wary. She looked older than 60, worn down by time or guilt. Maybe both. Mrs. Dean? Dana asked, holding out her badge. I need to ask you about your husband, Russell. Her hand trembled. I haven't seen Russ in over 20 years. You two lived in Crestwood on 11th Street. Elizabeth's eyes darted. We're reopening a case involving a woman named Angela Simmons. Do you remember her? The color drained from her face. Dana pressed. Did she ever come to the house? I don't know. Mrs. Dean, someone buried a body behind your bathroom wall. Tears welled. Elizabeth covered her mouth. He said she left. He said she ran off after a fight. I didn't know. But you suspected. Elizabeth collapsed into the couch, shoulders shaking. He came home that night covered in dirt. Said she was gone. Said if I ever said anything, I'd join her. Dana sat quietly. Let her cry. Then asked the question she already knew the answer to. Did he kill her? Elizabeth nodded. Yes. That confession gave Dana what she needed. Probable cause to issue a bolo, be on the lookout for Russell Dean. If he was alive, he could be anywhere. But Ranger kept pasting that hallway like the story wasn't over. Because it wasn't. The next week, DNA confirmed the identity of the remains. Angela Simmons was laid to rest in a town memorial 27 years after she vanished. The mayor declared a local day of remembrance. Her parents, now in their 80s, sat front row in wheelchairs holding hands. Dana stood beside them, her uniform crisp, her voice steady. She didn't run, she told the crowd. She never left. But now, thanks to one incredible dog, she's finally going home. That night, Ranger lay at the foot of Dana's bed, eyes half closed. She knew he was tired. His hips ached more now. The vet had given him 6 good months, maybe less. But he'd uncovered something no one else could. He'd listened when no one else did. And Dana? She wasn't done either. Because the man who did this was still out there, and she was going to find him. The anonymous tip came in at 2:47 a.m. A shaky voicemail, male, southern accent, no name. If you're looking for Russ, there's a man runs a tire shop outside Meridian, Mississippi. Real quiet. Goes by Ray Dean, ain't hard to find, but be careful. Man's not right. Then, click. Dana sat upright in bed, staring at her phone. Ranger, curled at the foot of the bed, opened one eye. He didn't move, but his ear twitched. Mississippi, Dana whispered. That's where you disappeared to, huh, Russell? She got dressed before sunrise, packed a duffel, and made one call to the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation. By 9 o'clock a.m., she was behind the wheel of her dusty department-issued Tahoe, Ranger riding shotgun, his nose pressed to the window as Ohio disappeared in the rear view. Meridian wasn't much different from Crestwood. Same small town feel, same aging downtown strip with faded signs and mom-and-pop shops. It was the kind of place where strangers were noticed. The tire shop was a cinder-block building on the edge of town, surrounded by wrecked pickups and old tires stacked 10 feet high. The faded sign above the garage door read, Dean's Auto and Tire. Inside, a tall, bearded man in oil-stained overalls wiped his hands on a rag as Dana stepped in. His eyes flicked from her badge to her face, then down to the German shepherd at her side. "Something I can help you with, officer?" His voice was calm, measured. "You Ray Dean?" Dana asked. "Yep." "Real name Russell?" "A beat. Just a beat too long." "Don't know what you're talking about," he replied. Ranger let out a low, warning growl. Dana leaned forward, elbows on the counter. "We found Angela Simmons, behind the wall. You remember her?" The man's jaw clenched. His hand squeezed the rag so tight grease oozed between his fingers. "I think you got the wrong guy," he said, stepping back. But it was him. She could see it now. The bone structure under the beard, the eyes, the way his left shoulder dipped ever so slightly from an old injury mentioned in the original case file. Donna didn't press further. Not yet. She left the shop and drove 3 blocks down to meet the local sheriff and MBI agents. Within an hour, they had a warrant and returned with a full team. Russell, or Ray, was gone. Gone in under an hour. He hadn't vanished. Not this time. He'd run. They searched the shop top to bottom. No sign of where he went, but Ranger kept circling a gravel patch behind the garage. Donna followed him. There, tucked behind a rusted-out van, was a metal shed. Locked. The kind with a padlock older than the shed itself. The warrant covered all property. They broke it open. Inside, standard tools, scrap metal, some parts. But Ranger didn't care about any of that. He went straight to the back, tail stiff, nose pressed to the floor. He scratched, not wildly, just once. Then he sat, ears alert. Dana dropped to her knees and knocked on the floor. Hollow. They pulled up the sheet metal. Underneath was a second layer of plywood. Under that, dirt. Fresh dirt. 2 hours later, they uncovered a shallow pit. Inside it, wrapped in plastic and canvas, a set of women's clothes, blood-stained, dated style, early 2000s, and another pendant necklace. "Who is she?" an agent asked. Dana's stomach turned. "I don't know yet." But she had a sinking suspicion this wasn't Angela's only secret. Back at the station, Dana sat in a cramped MBI office, flipping through files. She requested a list of missing women within 50 miles of Meridian between 2002 and 2005. The lab would take weeks to confirm the ID, but she knew the pattern. Russell Dean hadn't just run from Ohio. He'd continued. That night, she stayed in a roadside motel. Ranger paced the room, restless, circling the door. Dana sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the news alert on her phone. Crestwood Hero Dog aids police in cold case murder investigation. Ranger's picture was everywhere now, ears perked, eyes sharp, paws planted beside Dana in the bathroom of that house back in Ohio. The comments flooded in. "God bless this dog. Give him a medal. How many more women might he save?" And then one that made Dana pause. They should have found her sooner. She put the phone down. No one wanted to admit it, but they all thought the same thing, that Angela could have been found in 1998, if someone had just listened. She reached for Ranger and gently pulled him into her lap. He was heavy, solid, still warm, but he was aging, and she could feel it now more than ever. "You're not done, buddy," she whispered. "We're not done." The next day brought another break. A woman in Jackson called in, said she saw the news, said she used to work with a man named Russ who looked just like the guy in the photo, beard and all. Claimed he lived in a trailer off a dirt road just outside Yazoo City. Dana and the MBI team followed the lead. The trailer was abandoned, dishes still in the sink, curtains drawn, and a single photograph on the wall. Russell. Young, unshaven, grinning, arm around a woman in her 30s. She wasn't Angela, and she wasn't the woman from the pit. On the back of the photo, me and Lorna, 2005. They ran her name, Lorna Evans. Missing since 2006. No family, no search effort. Just gone. Another one. By sunset, they expanded the search. Dogs were brought in. Ground-penetrating radar. The land behind the trailer stretched for acres. Then once again, it was Ranger who stopped first. He led Dana behind a row of dying pine trees, nose twitching. At a clearing near an old chicken coop, he barked. Once, sharp and loud, and began pawing the dirt. Another spot. Another grave. They unearthed 2 more sets of remains by morning. All women, all buried with the same method. Canvas wrap, jewelry intact, always a necklace, always someone forgotten. It wasn't a cold case anymore. It was serial murder. The FBI took over, coordinating with state and local authorities. Dana was asked to stay on the task force. No one knew the case better. They built a timeline. Angela was first, but she wasn't the last. Between 1998 and 2006, Russell Dean had likely killed at least 4 women, maybe more. The evidence was mounting: photos, journal entries, burial patterns, and yet he remained one step ahead. Until now, because now they had his scent, and now they had Ranger. Back in Crestwood, Angela's story had shifted the town forever. The Carters, after much debate, decided to donate the house to a local shelter for domestic violence survivors. Melissa told the local paper, Angela deserved safety. If her house can give that to someone else, then maybe something good can come of all this. At the dedication ceremony, Dana gave a short speech. But it was Ranger who stole the show. He wore his old canine vest, walked slowly now, but proud, always proud. Children hugged him, veterans saluted, parents cried. And when the mayor knelt to pin a medal on his collar, Ranger didn't move. He just stared at the crowd, steady and silent, as if reminding everyone the work isn't over. That night, as Dana and Ranger returned to their motel in Mississippi, the phone rang again. Another tip, another woman, another town. Russell Dean was still running, but now, so were they. By the time Dana reached the town of Hartridge, the heat was already crawling up her neck. Mississippi in July felt like it was built out of wet concrete and air you had to chew. The town itself was barely more than a couple gas stations, a church with a flaking white steeple, and a bait shop that hadn't changed since 1984. On the edge of it all, nestled by the river, was the tip's location, a run-down wooden house hidden behind trees with weeping moss and a mailbox that had been bashed in so many times the numbers were spray-painted on the side. According to the tipster, Ray Dean had lived here on and off between 2007 and 2012. Alone. No rental records, no paper trail, just cash, fake names, and stories that never lined up. Ranger stood on the porch like he'd been there before. He sniffed, snorted, and stared at the floor like the dirt underneath could talk. Dana didn't knock. The place was abandoned. Inside, the air was thick with mold and dust. The living room was filled with broken furniture, beer cans, and a rusting wood-burning stove. There were faded curtains still drawn across the windows, and a strange, cloying smell, like wet cloth and something that had been forgotten for far too long. But it wasn't until they reached the back bedroom that things changed. That's where Ranger stopped moving. He stood at the threshold, ears back, tail low, eyes locked on the corner of the room. Dana followed his gaze. There, in the floorboards, was a small metal ring embedded in the wood. A trapdoor, covered in a dusty old rug and barely visible. Dana's pulse kicked up. She stepped forward, knelt, and slowly pulled up the ring. It groaned, screamed really, as the floorboard door lifted, revealing a steep drop into blackness. She flicked on her flashlight. The beam cut through the dust like fog, revealing a crude staircase leading into what looked like a cellar carved from dirt and stone. She looked at Ranger. He didn't flinch. Dana radioed it in. Possible holding area, she said. Send backup, I'm going in. She drew her sidearm, took the stairs one at a time, and stepped into the darkness. The smell was worse down there. Not death, but something close. Damp, rotting, the smell of time and despair. The room itself was small, maybe 8 by 10 feet. No windows. The walls were made of concrete and the ceiling was reinforced with old railroad ties. A single rusted cot sat in one corner. A chain bolted to the wall dangled beside it. Dana's hand went cold. On the cot sat a single object, a child's pink hairbrush. She picked it up carefully, holding it in a latex-gloved hand. It was cracked and faded, but clearly meant for a little girl, decorated with cartoon flowers, the kind you'd find at a dollar store. In the far corner, a bucket, empty food tins, a plastic water jug. And on the wall, etched into the stone, were names. 5 of them. Angela Lorna Shea. M. Anna. Dana stared at the list, her mouth dry. Only 2 of those names had come up in the investigation. There were 3 more. She took photos of everything. Heart-pounding, then climbed back into the daylight. Ranger waited at the top, breathing slow but steady. His eyes never left hers. "You were right," she whispered. Again. By the next morning, the basement had been sealed off, and the FBI had swarmed the area. Forensic teams took samples, gathered evidence, and worked to trace the origins of the pink hairbrush. A partial fingerprint was lifted from the rusted cot, pending analysis. But Dana already knew this was Russell's place, his prison. And the names on the wall? They weren't trophies. They were victims. Shay Morales was reported missing in 2009 out of Biloxi, 22 years old. Last seen leaving her shift at a diner off Route 90. Emily M. Tarson was only 13 when she vanished from Jackson in 2007. Her parents had been convinced she was abducted, but no suspects were ever found. Her pink hairbrush was still listed in her case file as last seen with victim, Anna McKee, 38. Disappeared from a truck stop outside Natchez in 2011. Divorced, working late shifts, trying to get custody of her kids back. All of them had fallen through the cracks, until Ranger led Dana down those stairs. They searched the riverbanks next. The terrain was thick, mosquito-ridden, and unforgiving. Ranger struggled now, his limp more pronounced. Dana carried water bottles for him and stopped every 15 minutes to rest his legs. But he wouldn't quit. He never had. He barked near a patch of overgrown brush on the north edge of the house's property line. A forensic team cleared the area and found another shallow grave beneath tree roots. Inside, the remains of a young woman. Dental records later confirmed it was Emily Tarson. She'd been buried just 50 yards from the place she was imprisoned, like she never left. The media exploded again. The Crestwood case was now a multi-state homicide investigation spanning over a decade. Russell Dean was officially labeled a serial killer. Photos of him, aged, manipulated by AI to estimate current appearance, were plastered across the country. Billboards, gas stations, even on digital ads between YouTube videos. America wanted to find him. But Dana didn't care about the headlines. She just wanted justice. That night, as she sat by the river with Ranger curled at her feet, she felt the weight of every name on that wall pressing on her chest. 5 names. 5 stories, 5 voices that had been swallowed by silence. And it had taken a dog to break that silence. She ran her hand through his graying fur. "I don't know how you do it," she whispered, "but I thank God every day you're here." He licked her hand once, slow, deliberate, then closed his eyes. The FBI set up a command post in Hartridge. They began re-interviewing everyone who'd ever known Russell. A woman in Alabama claimed she saw him at a flea market 3 months ago. A former co-worker in Georgia said he used to go fishing in a bayou near Lafayette. Tips were coming in by the hundreds, but none felt solid. Not until a new piece of information landed on Dana's desk. A gas station security tape from last week. A man matching Russell's description, buying propane and duct tape at a roadside stop in eastern Louisiana. The timestamp? 4 days ago. Dana stood up, grabbed her gear, and turned to Ranger. "You ready to go again?" He struggled to his feet. He didn't bark. He didn't wag his tail. But he walked toward the door. That was answer enough. As they loaded into the SUV, a neighbor from the Hartridge street corner stepped out with a small plate. "I made something for him," she said, eyes misty. It was a grilled chicken breast, no seasoning, just the way Dana said Ranger could eat it. "He's a good boy," the woman said. "Saved all those girls. Maybe he'll save one more." Dana smiled, took the plate, and passed a piece to Ranger. He ate slowly, carefully. But when he was done, he sat up straight. Eyes forward, nose in the wind. Because the hunt wasn't over. Not yet. They crossed into Louisiana under the weight of silence. The marshland stretched wide like a green ocean. Cypress knees rising like jagged teeth from swamp water. Spanish moss dangling like ghosts. The sun was a low burn in the sky, and the hum of cicadas vibrated through the air thick enough to drink. Dana drove slowly down the narrow, cracked blacktop highway just south of Opelousas, where the tip had pointed them. The gas station security footage was clear. Russell Dean, now clean-shaven and wearing a worn fishing cap, bought propane, duct tape, and 2 jugs of water just 4 days earlier. No one had seen him since. He was getting bolder again. That made him dangerous. They reached the edge of a tiny fishing community called Cane Hollow, a cluster of trailers, shacks on stilts, and wooden piers stretching into the shallow bayou. A place where you could disappear, where people kept to themselves, and law enforcement was something you called only if the gators started walking through your kitchen. The sheriff of St. Landry Parish, a wiry man with nicotine-stained fingers and mirrored sunglasses, met them on the dock. "You the one with the dog?" he asked. Dana nodded. "Name's Ranger." The sheriff squatted, offered a hand. Ranger sniffed but didn't move. His back legs trembled slightly. Age was catching up fast. But his nose still worked, and that's all Dana needed. They started near a half-collapsed boathouse, the sheriff said. Some drifter had been squatting in. Inside, empty beer cans, a rusted kerosene lantern, a cot covered in mold. Ranger sniffed the cot and sat. His ears twitched, and he let out a single low bark. "He was here," Dana said. The sheriff raised a brow. "That dog always right?" "Every time." They followed the trail from the boathouse along a footpath that wound through reeds and brush. Ranger moved slowly now, each step deliberate, but his nose never left the ground. After half a mile, the trail dead-ended at a small stilt house built above the water. Sun-bleached siding, green shutters, and a porch sagging under the weight of time. There was smoke rising from the chimney. Someone was home. Dana didn't wait. She climbed the creaking stairs, Ranger at her side, and knocked. A woman answered, maybe mid-60s, with sharp eyes and a jaw that hadn't smiled in a decade. "You law?" she asked, voice flat. "Federal task force," Dana said. "I'm looking for this man." She held up a photo of Russell Dean, digitally aged, eyes sunken, beard trimmed short. The woman's eyes didn't flinch. "Don't know him." "Your neighbors saw him behind your house 2 nights ago. You talking about the guy who fixed my generator? Says his name was Charlie, paid in cash. Can I look around?" "Not without a warrant." Donna met her eyes. The air grew thick. Ranger stood between them, ears lowered. Then he moved, walked past the woman, into the house, like he owned the place. Dana followed. Inside, the living room was tidy. Bible on the table, a photo of a soldier in uniform beside it, and an old TV still playing a scratchy weather report. But Ranger ignored all that. He went straight for the bedroom. Then he stopped, in front of the closet. Dana opened it slowly. Just clothes. But Ranger began to paw at the floor. There, beneath a thin rug, was a loose floorboard. Dana pulled it up. Inside, a metal box. She opened it. Inside were driver's licenses. 5 of them, all with different names, all different states. But every photo was of Russell Dean. A 6th one had a photo of a young woman, Lorna Evans, one of his victims, the woman behind her side. "He told me she left him. Said people were after him. Said he needed a place to stay. I didn't know who he was." "You knew enough to hide this," Dana said. "I didn't know she was dead," the woman whispered, voice cracking. "He said she ran off with a trucker." "Did you see him with another woman?" The woman paused. "I heard crying, in the shed. Thought it was a cat. Told him to get rid of it." Dana's hands curled into fists. The shed was a 1/4 mile from the house, back through brush so thick it tore at her arms. The sheriff brought bolt cutters. The padlock came off with a snap. Inside was dark, stifling. The smell hit first. Urine, sweat, blood, and something older. There was a mattress, stained, ropes, a hair tie, and etched into the wood wall, Emily, Lorna. "I'm still here." Dana turned away, eyes stinging. Then she heard the bark. Ranger, out back. She ran, heart hammering. Behind the shed, he stood frozen, nose pointed toward a half-sunken pit in the ground, waterlogged, covered in branches. The team dug through it. Inside, another body, wrapped in canvas, small, fresh. The coroner estimated she'd been dead no more than 5 days. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to the skull. No ID, no name, just a girl. A girl Russell Dean had killed days after being spotted on camera. He was escalating again, getting careless. That made him close. The FBI mobilized a full manhunt across the parish. Roadblocks were set, drones in the air, boats in the bayou. But he knew the land, and he had a head start. They searched for 48 hours straight. No sign. Then, on the 3rd day, a local fisherman reported a boat missing from his dock, a flat-bottomed pirogue. Dana scanned the map. "If he's paddling east," she said, "he's heading for the Atchafalaya Basin." 1,000 square miles of swamp, channels, and murky water. Perfect for hiding. Ranger was tired. He couldn't run anymore, but he still tried. In a flat-bottomed boat, Dana and 2 agents drifted through the cypress maze. Ranger sat between her legs, eyes half closed, but every now and then he lifted his nose and sniffed the air. Suddenly he barked. Short, urgent. Then he stood, bracing himself against the boat's edge, staring dead ahead. There, through the trees, a thin column of smoke. They paddled silently, hearts racing. A makeshift camp, tarp strung between trees, a fire still smoldering, a tin cup resting on a tree stump. Dana stepped off the boat, gun drawn. No one in sight. But Ranger ran, straight to a tree. Tied to it, half-conscious and covered in bruises, was a teenage girl. They cut her down. She was barely able to speak, but she whispered one name. Charlie. He'd gone into the swamp an hour earlier. Said he'd be back. The girl survived. She had a broken arm, malnutrition. But she lived. She was 14, reported missing 2 weeks ago from Baton Rouge. Ranger never left her side in the hospital. When she cried, he whined. When she slept, he rested his head on her leg. Russell Dean was still out there. But now the country knew. And now Dana had a living witness. One more girl rescued. One more truth uncovered. And once again, it was the dog who found her. The girl's name was Savannah Lee Mercer, 14, a freshman in high school. Her parents had thought she'd run away after a fight about a cell phone. Her posters had barely stayed up a week before the town moved on. But she hadn't run. She'd been taken, held in that swamp shack for 9 days. And if it hadn't been for Ranger, she would have been the 6th name carved into a wall, buried, forgotten, turned into a cautionary tale. Dana sat beside her hospital bed in Lafayette General, watching Savannah sleep through the hum of IVs and monitors. The girl's face was bruised and pale, her body thin, her hands trembling even in rest. But she was alive. Ranger lay by her feet, one ear twitching every time a nurse walked by. He hadn't left her side. 3 days passed, then the call came. A hunter deep in the Atchafalaya Basin claimed he saw someone matching Russell Dean's description. Dirty, barefoot, limping through marsh grass with a stolen rifle. The man ran when he spotted the hunter's boat, but he left behind a clue, a camouflage duffel bag containing a rusted revolver, a pocket knife, and 5 more ID cards. One of them had Savannah's name. That was all the confirmation Dana needed. A task force mobilized within hours. State troopers, FBI, wildlife agents with airboats and thermal drones. But Dana took a smaller team, just 2 marshals, herself and Ranger. They weren't chasing a ghost anymore. They were closing in on a man too tired to keep running. They launched their pirogue before sunrise and slipped quietly into the dense swamp where the water reflects sky and time stands still. Ranger was slow to move. His legs stiffened with each passing day. But when Dana showed him Savannah's bracelet, he sniffed it, then let out a soft whine. And then he stood. They found the shack around noon. Deep in the swamp, practically melting into the trees, the one-room cabin sat on stilts, half-rotted and hidden under moss. Inside, no one. But still warm embers smoldered in a fire pit. Dana motioned for silence. Ranger sniffed the air. Then his head snapped to the right. He took off. Through reeds and thick water, Dana followed. Her boots sank in muck. The marshals crashed behind her. Ranger disappeared around a bend. Then, a gunshot. Dana's blood froze. She ran faster and found him standing in front of a fallen cypress. Behind it, Russell Dean, crouched, shirtless, face covered in sweat and mud, holding a rifle with shaking hands. He'd fired, but missed. Ranger hadn't moved. He just stood there, staring. Dana raised her weapon. "Russell Dean, drop it!" He laughed. "You can't prove nothing. That girl, she ain't dead." Dana's voice was calm, even. "She's alive. She ID'd you." Another laugh, but it cracked in the middle. His body sagged. The gun lowered. "I saved him, you know," he muttered. "From bad homes, bad people. You killed them." They wanted to stay. His voice dropped into a whisper. "They were mine." Ranger growled low. The sound made Russell flinch. That's when he dropped the gun and bolted. He didn't make it far. 20 feet into the brush, a U.S. Marshal tackled him hard, knees in the back, cuffs on. Russell didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just stared at Ranger like he'd seen a ghost. The trial took months. Evidence spanned 3 states, 11 years, and more pain than any courtroom should hold. Russell Dean was charged with 5 counts of murder, 3 counts of kidnapping, and additional charges tied to the bodies recovered from Mississippi and Louisiana. Savannah's testimony, raw, brave, was the final blow. The jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts. He was sentenced to life without parole. He would never hurt another girl again. By then, Ranger was nearly 12. His walk was more of a shuffle. His eyes dimmed. The vet said the arthritis had advanced to the point where medication could only slow the discomfort. But he was still Ranger. Still the dog who scratched at a wall when everyone else told him to sit still. Still the dog who followed the scent of death into swamp water and shadow. Still the dog who saved a girl's life. At the National Canine Law Enforcement Memorial in Washington, D.C., a special ceremony was held 6 months after Russell's conviction. Officers, survivors, veterans, and children filled the lawn in front of the stage. Dana stood in uniform, holding back tears, as Ranger, draped in an honorary vest with a silver star, was brought up in a cart lined with soft pillows. He couldn't walk anymore, but his ears still perked up at applause. The crowd gave him a standing ovation, and when the mayor of Crestwood took the mic and said, "This dog didn't just sniff out evil. He reminded us that loyalty can break silence, and that courage doesn't always walk on 2 legs, Dana finally cried. Because it was true. 3 weeks later, Ranger passed away, in Dana's arms, on the porch of their home, wrapped in a flannel blanket, after finishing his favorite treat, a peanut butter biscuit. His eyes closed slowly. No pain, no fear, just peace and presence. Dana buried him beneath a tree near the river, just outside Crestwood, where wildflowers grew and birds came to rest in the evenings. A small stone marked the spot. Ranger, he listened when no one else did. Savannah came to visit the grave that fall. She brought a letter, folded in 4, slightly smudged. It read, "Dear Ranger, you didn't know me, but you found me. When I was too scared to scream, you heard me. When no one saw me, you did. You saved my life. I'm going to be somebody now. For you, I promise. Love, Savannah." Dana read it twice, then placed it under a smooth rock at the base of the tree. A year later, Savannah was thriving. Therapy, art school, a scholarship started in her name for survivors of trauma. And the story of the dog who uncovered the truth behind a wall, who chased a killer across 3 states, who never gave up even when his legs did, became part of American history. Ranger's Law was introduced in Congress, mandating new protocols for reopening cold cases when evidence from canine alerts is present. It passed with bipartisan support. Ranger, the retired canine who scratched at drywall, changed the system, one wall at a time. Thank you for following this story, for listening, for remembering. Ranger wasn't just a dog, he was a hero. And sometimes that's all it takes to change everything, a single bark that refuses to be ignored. Now we want to hear from you. What would you have done if Ranger had scratched at your wall? Do you believe animals sense what humans can't? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to share this story with someone who believes in the power of second chances. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Heroes for Animals to hear more real, unforgettable stories of courage, compassion, and the dogs who never gave up.